Okay. So let us go back again and recapitulate first what are the new things that we have learned, and then we shall proceed with today's new things. Okay. So the main 2 points that we have learned till now are just written over here. So the first point is that the motion of a particle is described by a wave. This is the first point that we have learned, which is something very new, unlike classical mechanics, where a particle has got a precise position and momentum, and it is only at one point. The second new thing that we have learned is that the waves which describe these particles can be superposed, or this is what is called the principle of linear superposition. How did we arrive at these two new things? We arrived at this by considering a thought experiment shown over here, the two-slit experiment, where electrons are being shot. Electrons arrive at this screen which has got two slits. You may consider that the electrons arrive one by one. So no two electrons arrive together. The electrons arrive one by one onto the screen which has got two slits. The electrons pass through these two slits, either of these two slits or whatever, and then they arrive at this screen over here where we have detectors. So the electrons are detected over here. What we find very surprisingly is that on the screen where you detect the electrons, if you plot the number of electrons as a function of position on the screen, what you get is something that looks like an interference pattern. In order to explain this, you have to invoke the fact that each electron, one electron arriving here, has a wave corresponding to it. So the electron which comes onto this screen with the two slits has a wave corresponding to it. Once the wave encounters these two slits, there are secondary waves emitted from the slits. The secondary wave emitted from slit A is psi A. The secondary wave emitted from slit B is psi B. These two propagate to the screen here. To calculate the wave on the screen, you have to superpose psi A, the contribution from slit A, with psi B, the contribution from slit B, on the screen over here. So you get psi, the psi from A plus B both together. And this is the wave corresponding to this single electron coming here on the screen. Now, how do we interpret this wave? We interpret this wave as follows. The probability of finding the electron at any point on the screen is proportional to the mod square of the wave function. And precisely the probability of finding the electron in some interval dx around the point x is given by dp. This is the probability of finding the electron in this small interval here. This is the mod of psi squared into the interval dx. So the wave function, or this wave psi, has a probabilistic interpretation. It tells you the probability of finding the electron somewhere. So when the electron propagates from here, goes through these two slits and arrives here, in this intermediate process we have to describe the electron in terms of a wave, which is there everywhere. You cannot say that the wave is here or here. It is there in both of these places. It is there everywhere. But when you detect the electron, you find that you only detect one electron at a time. So the electron suddenly materializes at one point. It is no longer there everywhere. It is there at one point. And the probability of finding the electron is given by the wave function. So I hope the significance of the wave function is clear. Yes?
So what we plot is the number of electrons we are getting at every point.
Right. You are plotting the number of electrons you are getting at any point on the screen.
So is the probability of getting an
Electron at a point is proportional to the number of electrons.
Right. So the probability is the number of electrons at this point divided by total number of electrons.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we get here is the probability. And the probability itself exhibits the interference pattern. So this is how we are led to these two very important points, that you have to have a wave to describe a single particle. You're allowed to superpose these waves, and the interpretation of the wave is in terms of probabilities. So we have to now bear these three things in mind. Now in the last class, we constructed a plane wave to describe a particle, a free particle, moving along the x-axis. So we had this plane wave, and the plane wave has got two free parameters, the wave vector k, or the wave number k, and the angular frequency omega. We identified the angular frequency with the energy of the particle, and the wave vector with the momentum of the particle. Now, the fact that it is a free particle allowed us to relate the energy and momentum. This is where the fact that it is a free particle has gone in. E is equal to p square by 2m, which gives us the relation between the angular frequency, the time dependence, with the wave number or the spatial dependence of this wave. And we have this dispersion relation for this particle, where m is the mass of the particle. And we used these to calculate the phase velocity and the group velocity. The phase velocity is defined to be omega by k. The group velocity is d omega by dk. And we found that the group velocity actually gave us the velocity of the particle, which is the ratio of the momentum to the mass. So this is all this we had done in the last class. Now, using this identification between the angular frequency and the energy, the wave number and the momentum, we could also write the same wave directly in terms of the momentum and the energy. Sorry, this should be the energy. So we had psi xt is equal to some constant a, which could be imaginary or complex, into e to the power minus I by h cross px minus et. This is a plane wave, and this corresponds to a particle with momentum p and energy E moving along the x direction. Now, if you interpret this wave in terms of probability, then the probability of finding the particle at any point is the mod square of this. The probability density is the mod square of this. And we found that the probability density is a constant. So such a particle which has got a clearly defined, a precise value of momentum and energy has got no positional information. It has got equal probability of being everywhere at all instants of time. So we find that if you have a wave where the momentum and energy are precisely defined, are precisely known for the particle, you have absolutely no position information. The particle could be anywhere along the x-axis. This particle is moving along the x-axis, and it could be anywhere along the x-axis. So then we try to overcome this problem, that lack of positional information, by seeking recourse in the superposition principle. So what we did was to superpose different waves with different momenta to construct another wave, psi xt, which is a superposition of waves with different values of momentum, with all possible values of momentum, A of p indicating the weightage given to the different values of momentum. Now, this relation between the wave function and these coefficients of A of p, which indicate the weightage given to each different value of momentum, can be inverted. This relation is nothing but the Fourier transform relation. So we can also invert this relation, and these are related. A of p and psi xt are related by just the Fourier transforms. So they are just the Fourier transform of each other. Yes?
I think that will be not t, that is psi x0.
No, this is psi of t.
So the formula for a t, Because if you put t there,
Right, but you see, if you look at the previous equation, if you look at this equation, AP has no time dependence here, right? So the psi of x and t, the t dependence comes only through this ET. So when you invert this relation, if psi of t, x and t is related to AP in this fashion, if you invert it, you will find that the AP which you get is not dependent on time. So the time dependence which is here is exactly taken care of by this. Because the time dependence here arises because of this. There is no time dependence in this A of P. Okay, so this is correct. There is no doubt about this. Yes?
So we are taking into consideration the magnitude change of momentum. So what about the direction part?
Well, this could go from minus infinity to infinity, right? And it is moving in one direction. We shall consider a three-dimensional case later on. Mathematically, it's a little more complicated, that is all. There is no difference otherwise. For simplicity, we are considering a particle moving in one dimension. It is not allowed to move in the other two directions. Okay, it doesn't make any difference to the analysis.
Then how actually we will get difference pattern? So how?
Oh, okay, so you're talking about the two-slit experiment. If you want to describe that experiment, then you have to have a full three-dimensional wave. Okay.
This equation doesn't satisfy that.
No, so you cannot use a one-dimensional particle free to move in one dimension to describe the two-slit experiment. Okay, but the two-slit experiment was used to lead us to the fact that particles have to be described by a wave. And now we are studying what happens to a particle which can move in one direction only, one dimension only.
Then that probability factor is not coming into picture.
No, the probability is still there. The mod square of this is still the probability.
So then we are considering only in one direction, no?
Right. So a wave in one direction can interfere with itself. So the probability of finding a particle may vary from position to position.
So then we are calculating the probability at that one direction. That should be equal to 1 every.
No. Okay, it will be clear as we go on. Okay. If there is still doubt, we could discuss it later after the class. Now, the question which arises, once you superpose waves, the question arises, what is the significance of a superposition of waves with different value of momentum? So here, this psi of xt is a superposition of different values of momentum. How do you interpret this, that the fact that this wave, this particle, has at the same time got different values of momentum? Is a superposition of waves with different values of momentum. Well, the physical interpretation of this, which is supported by experiments, is as follows, that although the wave is made up of waves of different momenta, whenever you make a measurement of the momentum, you always get one single value of P. Different measurements, repetitions of the same experiment may give us different values of P. But each measurement will give us one unique value. I do it again, I may get a different value. I do it again, I get a different value for the same particle in the same wave. The probability of getting any particular value of P is given by the mod square of this A of P, which arose in the relation between the momentum wave functions and the psi of xt. So this is the probability of getting a particular value of momentum whenever we make a measurement of momentum here. So suppose I have a particle with this wave function, with this wave, and I measured the momentum. The probability of getting a particular value of momentum is governed by this, and it has to be calculated in this fashion. So this is how we interpret the coefficient A of P. Now, we had used the superposition principle to construct a wave function at a particular time instant t equal to 0. In this particular case, all the momentum values have got equal weightage, 1 by square root of 2 pi. This then gives us the wave function to be a Dirac delta function. What is a Dirac delta function? A Dirac delta function is a function which is 0 if the argument is not equal to 0. And it is infinity if the argument is 0. So the wave function is 0 everywhere except at the origin. So we are led to the conclusion that in this case, the particle is localized at the origin. It is located precisely at the origin. But this comes at the cost that we have absolutely no momentum information. This is because the mod square of A of p, which is 1 by 2 pi, is a constant. So all the values of momentum have got equal probability. So we have absolutely no momentum information. So now let us go on to something new. Now we want to construct a wave packet which has got some momentum information, some position information. We have already seen a situation where we have full position information but no momentum information. Full momentum information, no position information. Now in real situations, we encounter particles about which we have some momentum information. We have been able to measure the momentum with some accuracy. We have some position information. The position also can be measured with some accuracy, but we cannot measure possibly both. So we want to construct a wave packet to describe such a situation. So we shall deal with a wave function which is commonly used, which is called a Gaussian wave packet. Which is a particular form of the wave function. So before going to this, let us look at what is a Gaussian. And I shall first divert slightly and just obtain some mathematical relations for a Gaussian, which shall be useful later on in the course also. And then we shall go on to constructing the wave packet and looking at some of its properties. So a Gaussian, let us write it like this: Gxb is defined to be 1 by like this. So this is a Gaussian function. What does a Gaussian? The Gaussian function has got two parameters. There is a variable x and there is a parameter b. What does the Gaussian look like? A Gaussian looks like this. For a fixed value of b, the Gaussian looks like this. If I increase the value of b, then the Gaussian gets more spread out. So this is a smaller value of b. As I increase the value of b, the function gets more spread out. Also, the amplitude of the function falls. The width of the Gaussian is characterized by this parameter b. Larger b is, the wider is the Gaussian. So the width is something like this. You may say that the width is the point defined by the points where the value of the function falls to half the maximum value, full width at half maxima. And that is characterized by this parameter b. The larger you make b, the wider is the function, because the slower this x square by b square falls off. The slower it increases, and the slower this exponential of this minus quantity falls off. So this is the first feature of the Gaussian which you should note. Larger the value of b, the wider is the Gaussian. The second point, which is a mathematical feature, let us do some mathematics. Let us look at the integral I is equal to let us look at this integral, which is important if you're dealing with Gaussians. how do we go about evaluating this integral? Let us do it. Instead of referring to some other place where the value is evaluated, let us do this. So this is quite simply done if you look at the square of this integral, which we can write as minus infinity to infinity e to the power minus x square by 2 dx and e to the minus infinity to infinity e to the power minus y square by 2 dy. Now you can combine this. There are two there's a double integral, and you get now this is an integral over a plane. This is an integral over a full plane, and we can use polar coordinate system r and theta. In a polar coordinate system, this integral is just, if you use a polar coordinate system, then x square plus y square is equal to r squared, and this integral, this I squared, is nothing but 0 to 2 pi d theta 0 to infinity e to the power minus r square by 2 r dr, or defining z to be r square by 2, then this becomes equal to, the outer integral over theta can be easily done, which is just 2 pi, and this is nothing but 0 to infinity e to the power minus z dz, because this is dr square by 2, and here we have r square by 2, and z is r square by 2, which is nothing but 2 pi. So I hope this bit of algebra is clear to you. So we are finally led to the conclusion that this integral is equal to square root of 2 pi. Okay. This is an important result which we shall be using on and again. So kindly note it carefully. Now with this result, let us go back to our original Gaussian, which is this. Now it is clear from this and from the previous mathematical excursion that we just had that the integral of the Gaussian from minus infinity to infinity is equal to 1, because we have absorbed this b over here, it appears over here, and there is a 1 by square root of 2 pi which takes care of the 2 pi square root of 2 pi which appears when you integrate such a function. And this Gaussian is defined in such a way so that its integral from minus infinity to infinity over the x-axis is equal to 1. So we would now like to construct a situation where the probability of finding the particle along the x-axis has such a Gaussian distribution. So what should the wave function look like? So one possibility, the probability density looks like this Gaussian over here. So one possibility for the wave function is just the square root of this probability density. So if the wave function looks like this, we are referring to a time instant t equal to 0. So in this analysis, the time will not appear anywhere, and the wave function which we want to construct looks like this. which is nothing but the square root of a Gaussian. The mod square of this is the probability, which is nothing but the Gaussian over here. And this is the square root of this. So we want to now consider a wave function which looks like this, which is a Gaussian. This is what is called a Gaussian wave packet. At t equal to 0, the wave function looks like this. Now, this can be constructed by superposing waves of different momenta. The function a of p corresponding to this, let me write it down, and then we shall actually verify that it does indeed give you this wave function. So the a of p, the weightage given to different momenta, or you can call this the momentum wave function for this particular wave function, is given by So let us first understand the claim that we are making. We want to construct a wave function which looks like this, where the probability of finding the particle at some position is a Gaussian, described by a Gaussian. And I am claiming that this can be constructed by superposing plane waves with unique values of momenta with weight factors which look like this. So let us now go ahead and verify whether this actually does give us this or not. But can we? Okay. So this is a straightforward exercise, a little cumbersome maybe, but quite straightforward. So we have to calculate
So we can calculate the FP by using the original Fourier transform.
right. So that's what we will just do. I will just calculate the Fourier transform, and we will check that it actually gives us what we expect to find. Okay, let me do the mathematics. You will learn some little bit of mathematics which is useful for this course later on. So this is the relation between the wave function psi of x and the coefficient a of p. This over here is a of p. This is are the plane waves corresponding to different values of momentum, and here we are superposing them. So we want to evaluate this integral, and we shall be encountering this kind of integrals later on. So let me first discuss how does one go about evaluating this integral. So basically what we are doing is taking the Fourier transform of a Gaussian, because if you notice that this also is a Gaussian. The square root of a Gaussian is a Gaussian with some other normalization. So let me discuss how to go about evaluating this integral. So we start by looking at these two terms a little carefully. Okay, so let us look at these two terms a little carefully. So what are these two terms? These terms are exponential minus p square b square by h cross squared, and I can include this inside the exponential because the product of these two is the sum of these two terms. So I have minus I p x by h cross. So I want to simplify this the basic method for attacking such integrals is to convert this into a whole squared. Okay, so let us convert this into a whole squared. So this is going to be alpha, let us say, alpha squared, and this is going to be plus 2 alpha beta, and then I'm going to add plus beta squared and minus beta squared. So we have to look at this and identify what is alpha, what is beta. Then we have alpha plus beta whole squared minus beta squared. Once we have done this, we are through. So let us look at this and identify what is alpha. So identifying alpha is pretty straightforward. So what we have is alpha is PB by H cross. So we have PB by H cross. Now alpha 2 alpha beta has to give us IPX by H cross. Alpha already gives us PB by H cross. So we have to, so beta has to be plus I. So we have to divide by B to get this. So there will be a 1 by B over here. We have to divide by 2 to make this appear the same as this. So there will be a 2 here. And we have to multiply by X. Right. So if you expand this, you will get 2 terms. The first term corresponds to this. The second term corresponds to this. You will get one extra term, which is the beta squared here, which we have to subtract. So there is already a minus sign here. So we have to basically add IX by 2B squared. Now let us define this whole thing over here to be some z. Z by z. Let us say it is z by square root of 2. So the whole thing inside the square, inside this bracket, we are identifying by z by root of 2. So z by root of 2 is equal to PB by H cross plus IX by B2. Which gives us that dP is equal to H cross into dz by square root of 2 into B. Okay. And this exponential becomes exponential minus z square by 2 into exponential minus, if you expand this, you get minus x square by 4b square. So this whole thing over here is the same as this, and the integral over dP we can write in terms of dz to be h cross dz by square root of 2 into b. So using these into this, we get this is equal to minus infinity to infinity let us put the dP by square root of 2 pi h cross. So we have dz, and then we have h cross here by square root of 2b. I am just replacing dP in terms of dz, and we already had 1 by 2 pi h cross, and we have one more term which is very important, which is minus x square by 4b square. Right? So we have taken this and written it in terms of this, and dp is this in terms of z, and we had these factors already earlier. Now if you do the integral over z, it gives us a factor of square root of 2 pi. So this integral cancels out exactly with this square root of 2 pi. The h cross over here cancels out with this. So what are we left with? Let me write down what we are left with after we do the z integral. So we are left with equal to minus infinity to infinity is 2 by pi b, and we have the integral has been done, so the integral will not appear. This is just equal to this into exponential minus x square by 4b squared, and the factor of 1 by square root of 2b remain. Now the factor of square root of 2 into b can be absorbed inside this, and if you do that, what you obtain is the psi of x, which I had claimed it was supposed to give you, which is this. So we have actually verified that this, if you superpose waves with different momentum, giving this weightage to each of the values of momentum, you will encounter, you can reproduce this wave function. Now, what do we learn in this whole mathematical exercise? So the final point which we wanted to get was this. Now, the probability of getting the particle at any point, if we calculate that, if you calculate mod of psi x squared, this is let us also calculate the mod of this, which gives us the probability, the spread in momentum, the probability of getting some value of momentum. This is now, so the position of the particle, or the probability of getting the particle at some point, is given by a Gaussian whose spread is defined by this b. So if this be the Gaussian which gives the spread in the position of the particle, so the probability of finding the particle somewhere, then the probability of getting some value of momentum also is defined by a Gaussian. So this is x, this is mod psi x squared, and here I am plotting p mod a of p squared. This is also a Gaussian, but now the width is related to 1 by b. The b appears in the denominator here, so the larger the value of b, the wider is the Gaussian, the wider is the distribution. Larger the value of b, the wider is the distribution in space. But for the momentum, the width is defined by 1 by b. So the larger the value of b, the narrower is the distribution in momentum. So we can make the particle, we can make wave functions where the position of the particle is known with greater and greater accuracy, but at the cost of the information about the momentum, or if you want, you can increase the value of b, which will give us a wave function where the momentum of the particle is quite well defined, precisely known, but there is little positional information. So there is a relation between the amount of information you can have about the position and momentum. And this is what is the uncertainty relation, and it is obvious from here itself. If you calculate the uncertainty or the mean square value or the spread of this and the spread of this, the product of these two, delta x, delta p, is of the order of h cross, which you can see is clear from these two expressions. The width of this and the width of this, the product of these two is of the order of h cross. Okay. Now, this is not the specific feature of Gaussian wave packets. This is a general feature. If you try to describe a particle by a wave, you cannot construct a wave where both the position and momentum are precisely defined. It is not possible to construct a wave where both of these are precisely known. If you want to construct a wave where the position is very well defined, you have to do this at the expense of the momentum information. Or if you want to construct a wave where the momentum is well defined, this will come at the expense of the position information. And there is a fundamental relation between the uncertainty in the values of position and momentum, which is given by this. This is the uncertainty relation. So this is a limitation imposed by this whole structure, that you cannot simultaneously, for a particle, define, if this wave picture is correct, you cannot simultaneously predict precisely its momentum and position. There will be some uncertainty in both, and you can increase the uncertainty in one or decrease it at the expense or benefit of the other. This is a very important fundamental relation. In the next lecture, we will address the issue of how this information comes about, how this restriction comes about from the wave picture. So I will stop here.